Hello kings, queens, and majesties, welcome to WhaleStat. I am Slice of Otaku, and Shenhe is a pretty interesting addition to the Genshin Impact roster. This is a character that in theory should be able to provide a whole lot of value to our current Cryo Collective, and potentially those yet to be released. A character whose value will very much depend on how you use her and who you use her with, and so here we are with a character guide for her. As always, we will be taking a look at Shenhe's talents, passive skills, optimal artifacts, weapons, constellations, and team compositions, all of which you can find timestamps for on the video and in the description. For starters, Shenhe's normal attack string is one of the shorter ones as it only includes a series of 5 strikes. That being said, this is by far the least important and or useful aspect of Shenhe's kit, and so we can entirely forget about it. Her elemental skill, however, Spring Spirit Summoning, is far more useful. Now you can use this ability as either a press or a hold. With a press, Shenhe rushes forward along a linear path, dealing cryo damage. By holding, Shenhe instead deals cryo damage in an AoE ahead of her. Both applications then apply the Icy Quill effect to all teammates. And what Icy Quill does is make it so that when normal, charge, or plunging attacks as well as elemental skills and elemental bursts deal cryo damage to opponents, the damage is then buffed by a percentage of Shenhe's current attack. The key word there being current attack, not base attack. Icy Quill effects last for a certain duration and or hit quota depending on the means of use. For a press, we are looking at a 10-second duration and a 5-hit quota. For a hold, we are looking at a 15-second duration and a 7-hit quota. If one of these cryo damage instances strike multiple opponents, the effect is triggered multiple times based on the number of opponents hit. But even still, the number of times the effect is triggered is calculated independently for each party member with the Icy Quill, which is pretty nice. The cooldown for our options here being 10 seconds for a press and 15 seconds for a hold, so the exact same as their durations. A hold deals more damage than a press, but most likely we don't really care for Shenhe's personal damage, and which of the two we go with will depend on her passive skills, which we will get into in a moment. At talent level 1, the damage bonus is based on 45.66% of Shenhe's current attack. And at talent level 10, the damage bonus is based on 82.18% of Shenhe's current attack. This is good stuff, but it is important to note that Shenhe's elemental skill does not snapshot. And so if Shenhe's current attack fluctuates at any point during the presence of our Icy Quills, the damage bonus will also drop. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing as it goes both ways. If you can increase her attack during this, the attack buff she provides will increase proportionately. Shenhe's elemental burst is Divine Maiden's Deliverance. With it, Shenhe deals cryo damage in an AoE, which then creates a field which decreases the physical and cryo resistances of opponents within it. From here, it also deals a bit of cryo damage periodically. Again, in most cases we won't be all too concerned with her personal damage, but if nothing else, that periodic cryo serves as a periodic cryo application, which is going to be great for potential cryo resonance and or freeze teams. This field lasts for 12 seconds and has a cooldown of 20 seconds. At talent level 1, the resistance reduction to physical and cryo damage is 6%. At talent level 10, we are looking at a 15% reduction. Now, the energy cost of this burst is actually a bit steep at 80, and so we will more than likely want to get some good energy recharge going for us. For reference, a fellow buffer like Bennett has a burst with an energy requirement of 60. Then there's Kujosara with a comparable 80 energy cost. And this is to me MiHoYo being extra careful not to make their buffing units too powerful. But now let's talk about passive talents because it is hard to paint the full picture of Shenhe's capabilities without them being mentioned. First up, we have Deific Embrace. An active character within the field created by Shenhe's elemental burst gains a 15% cryo damage bonus. This is simple and fantastic, only being made that much better by her Ascension 4 passive, Spiritual Communion Seal. Shenhe's elemental skill provides additional benefits depending on how it has been used. With a press, elemental skill and burst damage is increased by 15% for 10 seconds. With a hold, normal, charge, and plunging attack damage is increased by 15% for 15 seconds, what again shares the same aforementioned durations. And this is where we find a bit of nuance to Shenhe's usage, because depending on what you currently have at your disposal, you may opt for either one. If your main DPS has their burst available to them, you'll probably want to press. If not, and their elemental skill isn't all too impactful, you'll want to hold. And when supporting certain characters, you may constantly stick to one option, but for some others, it may require a bit of preemptive thinking, and I think that's pretty cool. That being said, I've found that rushing forwards with Shenhe on a press can be pretty dangerous at times. In regards to talent priority, we're going to want her elemental skill as high as possible first and foremost. That way we're getting the utmost out of her benefits to the team with higher percentage bonuses. To follow, we will have her elemental burst, and dead last, there is her normal attack, which, unless you have nothing better to do, should be left alone because it serves us no benefit. Now let's move on to her constellations. I want to preface this by saying that currently my Shenhe is Constellation 0, and this is a character that works wonderfully without a single constellation. That being said, being the whale that I am, I will admit to being a tad bit enticed by her C6, much to my wallet's dismay, which we'll get into momentarily. At Constellation 1, Shenhe's elemental skill can be used one more time. This is actually pretty cool. This provides not only an easier time with energy accumulation for her elemental burst, but also the opportunity to proc both her press and hold buffs simultaneously. And with those buffs being individual, that is pretty remarkable. And if you really wanted to, you could use her elemental skill in the same fashion twice, providing your main DPS with extra buff mileage. This is a pretty awesome constellation and a wonderful stopping point if you are so inclined. At Constellation 2, the field created by Shenhe's elemental burst lasts for an additional 6 seconds. Not only that, but active characters within the field deal an additional 15% cryo crit damage. Thus far, I haven't exactly felt as though I need more time with Shenhe's elemental burst, but ultimately, that additional providence cannot hurt. With a duration of 18 seconds now, that then leaves us with only 2 seconds of mandatory cooldown. If you can manage to get Shenhe's energy recharge high enough, you are bound to get a whole lot more use out of her burst, which is fantastic. Now, when it comes to that 15% bonus to crit damage, considering we should, in theory, always have cryo elemental resonance for any of Shenhe's teams, our crit rate is more than likely in a good place, making crit damage that much more valuable to us. At Constellation 4, when characters with Icy Quill from Shenhe's elemental skill trigger its damage bonus effects, Shenhe will gain a stack of what is known as Sky Frost Mantra, of which there may be a maximum of 50 stacks, with each lasting for an entire minute. When Shenhe uses her elemental skill, she consumes all of these stacks, increasing the damage of her skill by 5% for each stack consumed. Now this to me is a pretty negligible constellation, as we more than likely won't be going to Shenhe for direct damage herself. At any rate, if you get her to Constellation 4 on purpose, you'll probably have your sights set on a Constellation 6. And at C6, when characters trigger the effect of Icy Quill by way of normal and charge attack damage, they do not count towards the trigger quota. This is insane. Truly, if you are using a character that deals cryo damage with their normal attacks, this is a lot of additional damage. And the two characters that most notably do this are already two of the most lethal DPS in the game, Ganyu and Ayaka. And hell, when we finally get a cryo catalyst user in the game, the value of this may only increase. However, the thing to note about Shenhe's Constellation 6 is that by desiring this, you are most likely drawn in by its benefit to other characters as opposed to Shenhe herself. And that is generally how it is with a character like this. If you already adore a cryo character and want them to be even greater, this is a reason to turn to Shenhe. Otherwise, you're unlikely to make proper use of the abilities available to her. But that's all for constellations. Let us now talk about Shenhe's weapons. First up, we have Shenhe's signature 5-star weapon, Calamity Queller, with a substat of attack percentage. At level 90, that is an additional 16.5% to attack. And if that doesn't sound like much to you, just take a look at that 741 base attack that it boasts, the highest base attack of any polearm in the game. This weapon's ability provides a 12% bonus to all elemental damage. After using an elemental skill, attack is increased by 3.2% per second at Refinement 1, and there may be a maximum of 6 stacks of this attack bonus, which brings us to an additional 19.2% attack. But to make things even better, when the character with this weapon is not on the field, this attack increase is doubled, bringing us to 38.4% additional attack for a collective bonus of 54.9% additional attack with this weapon, along with its crazy base attack. This is monstrous in Shenhe's possession, and by far her best in slot. To follow, we have the 5-star Engulfing Lightning with a substat of energy recharge for the sake of having that costly burst of hers available to us. At level 90, that is a bonus 55.1% energy recharge, and for comparison's sake, a base attack of 608. Its ability provides an increase to attack based on 28% of energy recharge over 100%, with a cap of 80% bonus attack in this way. A pretty steep benefit to achieve if you're not the Raiden Shogun for sure. However, we also gain a 30% energy recharge bonus for 12 seconds after using an elemental burst, which certainly helps. For our third 5-star, we have Skyward Spine, which also has a substat of energy recharge, which is 36.8% at level 90. Besides that, its special ability does not provide anything of note for Shenhe, unfortunately. In regards to 4-star weapons, Favonius Lance is up first with a substat of energy recharge that gets up to 30.6% at level 90. At Refinement 1, crit hits have a 60% chance to generate a small amount of elemental particles, which generates 6 energy for the character once every 12 seconds. At Refinement 5, that is a 100% chance every 6 seconds. And so for the sake of our burst usage, this is a great option. Next, we have Wavebreaker's Fin and its substat of attack percentage, which gets up to 13.8% at level 90. For every point of the whole party's combined maximum energy capacity, the elemental burst damage of the character equipping this weapon is increased by 0.12% with a cap of a 40% bonus. We don't care much for the bonus damage here, but with such a costly burst to begin with, we're already on the road to reaping the benefits. Lastly, we have Lithic Spear with a substat of attack percentage. For every character in the party from Liyue, the character with this weapon gains a 7% attack increase and a 3% crit rate increase. With 4 Liyue characters, we are looking at a 20% buff to attack and a 12% buff to crit rate. At Refinement 5, that is an 11% increase to attack and a 7% increase to crit rate per Liyue character for a maximum of 44% to attack and 28% to crit rate. With Shenhe being from Liyue, we are already on the path here as well. The crit rate is nice, but we are all about that attack for Shenhe, so that is the part we really care about. Now it's time for artifacts. For the sake of buffing, we will want Shenhe's attack stat to be as high as possible, so we can go with 2-piece Gladiator's Finale and 2-piece Shimenawa's Reminiscence, both of which provide us with a bonus of 18% to attack for a total bonus of 36%. Alternatively, we can buff the entire team by way of 4-piece Noblesse Oblige. With this, Shenhe's elemental burst damage is increased by 20%, and more importantly, by using it, our entire team has their attack increased by 20% for 12 seconds, what in a sense ends up buffing the team 2 ways over. In the straightforward sense, of course, and then through Shenhe. This buff does not have the necessity of being cryo damage, and if you are more inclined towards the use of your elemental burst, perhaps on account of using energy recharge weapons, this is a great choice. Personally, I opt towards the Gladiators and Shimenawa combination, however. But as usual, you should no doubt consider the substats available to you for either. Now, you can also mess around with 2-piece Blizzard Slayer and 2-piece Gladiators or Shimenawas, but that's if you are really into her personal cryo damage, which works but isn't exactly the best use of her as far as I am concerned. When it comes to her main stats, I personally go all in on attack percentage on all 3 sections. This is again for the sake of making the most of her buffs. We don't really need to worry about her critting or dealing cryo damage when her primary use is making the cryo DPS of the team as scary as possible. Our substat priority is going to be attack percentage above all else, followed by elemental mastery, flat attack, and then crit rate and crit damage. Now it's time to talk about team compositions. Shenhe's role is made abundantly clear by her entire kit. She is here to make our cryo DPS look real good, and so for that reason we will obviously need a cryo DPS. Ayaka is devastatingly powerful even by her lonesome, so pairing her with Shenhe can be absurd, but at that, Ayaka's elemental burst has a cost of 80 as well, and so getting both these characters to use their burst in conjunction can be a bit of a steep challenge. And with how long Shenhe's elemental skill cooldowns can be, she may not be the greatest battery possible. However, when we do in fact get things going, our numbers jump tremendously. And before we use Ayaka's burst, we're going to want to press Shenhe's skill. Otherwise, Ayaka's amazing charge attack should be made even more impressive by way of Shenhe's held elemental skill. Another great character to pair with would be Ganyu. Ganyu's missile fire-like charge attacks turn into drone strikes thanks to Shenhe. For her, you're pretty much always going to want to hold onto Shenhe's elemental skill. Kaya does not have access to cryo normal attacks by his lonesome, but with his elemental skill's relatively short cooldown of 6 seconds and his 60 cost elemental burst, we can still see some nice improvements to his damage. With him, we'll always want to press Shenhe's skill, and pretty much everything I just said about Kaya applies to Rosaria as well. Chongyun is a fun pairing, not only on account of their familial ties, but because of his ability to turn the normal attacks of certain other units into cryo, which may then benefit from Shenhe's buffs. And thanks to this, my Cryo Kazuha definitely made a return. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should definitely check out that video. Now, because we have cryo units in play, it is only natural to consider some hydro units as well for the sake of freezing. Kokomi can provide healing and also apply hydro to enemies rather quickly. What's more is that we can place Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers onto her, which at Refinement 5 allows us to bestow a bonus of 48% attack onto Shenhe, which lasts for 10 seconds. And to add even more to that, she can hold onto Tenacity of the Millelith, providing the team with an additional 20% attack. Kokomi is definitely finding use on my teams these days, and I am thankfully very happy to have her. Mona can apply Hydro too, and even furthermore buff our damage to astronomical levels. Xingqiu can apply Hydro really well with characters like Ayaka and Kaya. Tartaglia may do similarly at Constellation 4, which is pretty expensive, but below that you're better off with another Hydro unit. If you don't have any other options, there is always Barbara, who can also run Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers like Kokomi. From there, we'll want to group enemies together for the sake of delivering all this absurd damage. This brings us to Anemo 4-piece Viridescent Wielders for even more Cryo Shred by way of characters like Kazuha, Venti, or Sucrose. And on the note of Sucrose, she can also hold onto Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. Kazuha can use the 5-star Freedom Sworn for a 20% bonus to attack for the whole team that additionally adds 16% more damage to normal and charge attacks, pairing really well with Shenhe's held elemental skill buffs. Venti has access to the 5-star LG for the end, which can provide a 20% attack bonus to the team too, but then again Venti with certain teams can be pretty difficult to pair with since he lifts enemies up pretty high, but thankfully both Ayaka and Ganyu aren't really bothered by this at all. However, depending on who you decide to use as your main DPS, this may need to be considered. When using Shenhe, there should in theory never be a case in which you are not making use of Cryo Elemental Resonance, which provides our team with a 15% bonus to crit rate. And with our many buffs to cryo damage, it is safe to assume that our main DPS may be making use of the Blizzard Slayer set in some capacity. If that happens to be by way of the 4-piece set within a freeze team, that is virtually an additional 55% crit rate for us to work with, thus affording us the opportunity to be very heavy-handed in our accumulation of crit damage for our main DPS. All things considered, Shenhe is a fantastic addition to a cryo team, and one I expect will only become more and more valuable as time goes on. As of late, we've received element-specific buffers in the cases of Kujosara for Electro and Goro for Geo, but Shenhe here is a 5-star unit, and so with that, I'm curious how you may feel about her worth. As far as I'm concerned, a team can only have one main DPS, so I don't mind the supportive 5 stars at all. Hopefully this video was helpful to you in some way. If it was and you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe to Whalestat with notifications on. I have been your host, Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.